Like if you can put yourself out there in the right positions, then generally good things will happen. If you've grown up like I have in your career as being patted on the head for being a good doer, that becomes learned behaviour, and then you're always eager to please.
Where do you think we're getting it wrong at the moment?
You write it with so much hope and optimism that you're going to find this unicorn that is a data scientist and an art director.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Growth Distillery Unfiltered in partnership with the Marketing Academy. I am very delighted to be joined by Adam Johnson, who's the Chief Growth Officer at Nova Entertainment. But Adam has also held a raft of really senior marketing roles across some really impressive global brands, including Nokia and Microsoft. You are both a scholar and a mentor at TMA, the Marketing Academy. My understanding is that you were the first person ever to be both a scholar and a fellow.
Indeed,
And so I feel very privileged to be able to have a chat to you, apart from the fact that you have, I think, one of the coolest roles in the country, leading the growth of Nova. But that, mate, is what I call the A side. What I would love to know is, tell me a bit about you. What's the B side to Adam?
Wow, straight into it.
Straight into it.
Here we go. You've kind of reeled off a couple of roles that I've done, and I've none of that has been by design. The question of where do you want to be in 5 years' time is something that I've never had an answer for, and I've kind of my guiding philosophy from a career point of view is, put yourself in the path of serendipity. Like if you can put yourself out there in the right positions, then generally good things will happen.
I like that.
And that's very fortunately played out relatively well for me, both in terms of having kind of moved a couple of times between Australia and between Sydney and London, done some roles in kind of broader European roles, and kind of just kind of put yourself in the way of it, and generally good things will happen. There is and there's a real human element to that, which is if you put yourself in the orbit of other people and good influential people, then again, kind of interesting things seem to
swept up in that
happen.
momentum.
Yeah. Which is, again, none of that is that's the only kind of design that's been around it. The rest of it has been genuine kind of happenstance. But yeah, I started out in creative ad agencies.
Oh, yeah.
So I was lucky enough, and the kind of this notion of privilege is not lost on me in that my dad worked in the car industry, and I was a couple of years into my degree in French, which is non-vocational, unless you want to kind of be a French teacher.
It's a long bow from French to entertainment.
Exactly. Yeah, it was French and international business. So kind of it got to the third year of my degree, and my dad was like, "So what are you going to be at the end of all this?" And the bit that I really liked on the kind of the management studies side of my degree was marketing, and it was as we all say, it's kind of the confluence of commerce and creativity, as all loving parents do, they're like, okay, how can I help with this? And I managed to get a work placement at Toyota in the UK. It's a 4-week work placement that I moved around departments. One of those weeks happened to be in their advertising team, and their agency at the time, still is, I believe, was Saatchi & Saatchi. So I was this kind of 19-year-old kid who got to go to Charlotte Street in London and hang out in Saatchi & Saatchi. And I remember walking into reception going, wow, this is where I want to be. This is where I want to be. Yeah. And so then I graduated and did all the milk rounds at the various kind of creative agencies, got a role at what was then called Euro RSCG, now part of the Havas Group, and started out there and just loved it. And ironically, my first client was Microsoft, and then I ended up working at Microsoft in relatively senior marketing roles. So there was kind of a nice kind of full circle there. So that was probably the bit that I had kind of most, kind of most ambition to do. And then, like many people within agencies, be them creative, design, media, you do, particularly on the account service side, you do get to a point where you go, I want to be in control a bit more, and I feel like the client has probably the client's kind of calling the shots here, and I'm quite compelled by that, and the Nokia role was something that a former colleague of mine kind of alerted me to, and so I think 2006 I think it was. Here in Sydney, moved over from agency into client side, and that really opened my eyes to the broader impact that marketing can have on a business, and the day-to-day sales numbers that you could see happening off the back of work that you had done was really gratifying. And in 2006, Nokia was selling a lot of phones. 2008, given that the iPhone was launched in 2007, less so. But I tell you what, that period 2007 to 2012, it was probably in terms of working in adversity, when you've got this incredible brand but a substandard product in a market where the whole industry has shifted on its axis. I learned much more about resilience and leadership in that period than I did when Nokia was riding high and was effectively the sales team were an order taking team. So that was an incredible experience.
And so what have you collected along the way in terms of resilience from that time?
Yeah. Surround yourself with people who are genuinely on the journey. And it became really clear that when we had to make some very difficult decisions in terms of product or people, you could pretty much put people in two camps, which was, I really liked it when it was fun, but now not so much. And that's cool, right? That's, everyone has their own context and their own drivers, but it became quite trenches kind of culture. And the leader of the business at the time, a guy called Connor Pierce, who now is incredibly senior at Samsung. I think he's possibly the first non-Korean country president ever in Samsung's history. So he's done incredibly well, and he led us through that in like you'd expect a general to during wartime kind of thing. So kind of what it felt like. So there was that side of things in terms of leadership, and it was the thing that galvanized us most was a North Star, for want of a better word, which was in that short space of time, Nokia went from a market share in the 40s down to kind of single digit, and the kind of the perceived wisdom was, if we can get back to 10% market share, suddenly life gets easier because the telcos start to range your product again, and developers start to make apps for your ecosystem. So we had this kind of notion of, let's get back to 10% market share, and everything we did was all based on that. So having that North Star that everyone galvanized around was what drove, and we're talking about the UK market, that's what drove us back to that. So that was incredible. And then the other part of resilience is just personal, which is you just got to look after yourself. Like, you cannot be resilient professionally, and you can't be the best version of yourself when you're leading people if the long days then take away from your ability to remain healthy and awake, and you have to be physically resilient to be mentally resilient. So that was a key takeaway.
What were some of the strategies that you put in place? Because I think that this will resonate with a lot of professionals now. There is a litany of industries that are undergoing real change.
Yeah.
And I think that there's going to be a lot of professionals that are staring down the barrel of, if we can only get back to.
Yeah.
As someone that's kind of weathered the storm and come out the belly of the beast.
Yeah.
I'd love to get your take. What would be your guidance for them that are probably staring straight towards some storm clouds?
Yeah, it actually brings some interesting upsides when you're small, and say you want to grow from. It's easy to grow from 6% to 10% market share than it is to grow from 36 to 40, because actually the units you have to shift are proportionally smaller, and you can pick certain segments of the market. You go, actually, we can win in that space. And for Nokia at the time, it was let's not try and have the every phone in every store of every telco. Let's pick one of the major telcos and three of the smaller ones, and then from a commercial and relationship point of view, let's focus our efforts in there, and let's not pretend to be the premium brand in the market, because Apple has taken that mantle, and let's let Apple and Samsung do their thing. Let's go mid-range, because there are people that don't want, and we're now talking kind of 8-10 years ago, but there are still people that want a trusted brand. And have a low to mid cost handset. So the kind of really looking deep into market segmentation and picking the battles that you can win rather than trying to fight on all fronts, which was a real cultural shift for Nokia, because at the point they had the best selling.
Yeah, they were the silverback gorilla.
Exactly, right? They had the best selling low cost mobile and the best selling super duper smartphone and everything in between. So to re-engineer and reorientate that from the bottom up, because it was a top-down company, right? It was headquartered in Finland, and it was run by Finnish executives. And to try and change that from a top-down business, an engineering-led business, to a bottom-up sales and marketing led business was like wading through treacle. But there were certain markets in the world that did it better than others, and I was lucky within the UK and Ireland market that where I was running the marketing team, we managed to do that by picking our battles.
What's your playbook there? I think that I love that transition. I'm fascinated by the transition from, particularly technology companies that then have to pivot towards being marketing led to really get close to their consumers. And I suspect that this is, that this is a pretty common through vein in terms of companies that scale up based off the back of their product set and then all of a sudden have to compete in the big leagues. What would be your advice to marketers that are looking to navigate that transition, particularly where you might have an executive suite that is not necessarily aware of the value of the marketing toolkit?
Yeah. It exists. It even exists in my current role at Nova, where ultimately the product is what comes out of the speakers, and so much craft goes into that. It carries a not disproportionate but a proportional weight in terms of our decision making, investment, all those kind of things. I think in a technology business, there is a certain they worship at the altar of engineering and the products, and that's amazing, because as a marketer, you want the best thing to take to market. Where the challenge happens is when that product becomes commoditized and everyone's got the same screen and the same camera and the same app store and all those kind of things, and therefore you almost become and I've lived this in that business. You go from becoming a product marketer to a brand marketer, and you become more like an FMCG marketer, where you've got, you're all selling the same bottle of vodka kind of thing, and it's the bottle and the advertising that makes people choose product A over product B. To do that, ultimately, you've got to take the voice of the customer as high up in the organisation as you can, and sometimes people don't want to hear it. And the most effective thing that I've ever done in that is literally to drag the engineers into the focus group, to sit behind the two-way mirror and go listen to what these people are saying. It was quite challenging for them to hear some of the things, particularly from there's such a, but in Nokia at the time it was such an unbelievable runaway success within what is ostensibly a very small country, to then dominate the world in one of the highest growth categories as there's ever been in terms of mobile phones. To hear that was quite challenging for them, but that created a genuine 180, which is, wow, we need to take it's the way we take to market rather than what we take to market that can be the difference here. And like I say, putting them literally hearing it from the people who were signing over their £30 a month or their $60 a month, making those decisions was probably the penny drop moment for them.
Yeah, I think we often discount just the transcendent power of hearing the voice of the customer and really getting under the hood of what makes them tick. Yeah,
and a chart on a screen only do so
just doesn't
much.
Convey it. Yeah,
and it's very easy to dismiss it when they see in the small print, focus group N equals 10 people in a room. They go, oh, that's just 10 people in a room, kind of thing. They're not representative, and it's only when you hear them speak that it really hits home. So yeah, that's definitely if you can get people as close to the voice of the consumer as possible. It's quite trite I believe that the marketing person in the room is the voice of the consumer. Yeah, that's really nice it's nice to have that mantle, but if you're not going to listen to it, then it kind of doesn't really mean anything, and sometimes you almost have to take matters into your own hands.
And if we look at really championing the voice of the customer as one arrow in your quiver, and you look forward over the next sort of 3 to 5 years in terms of the marketer's tightrope, what do you think are going to be the skills that are going to separate the wheat from the chaff in terms of exceptional marketing leaders for the years to come?
I think when you talk about leaders, I think that the profile of people in a marketing team is going to fundamentally change.
Oh, okay. Explain.
I'm desperately trying not to use the two letters that everyone talks about in terms of AI, but I think that the skill set of people, if you look at the profile of a marketing team today versus what it needs to be in the future, the kind of people that a marketing leader will need to surround themselves with will be much more data-driven, much more technology-focused. People always talk about the relationship between, and this happens a lot on things like the Marketing Academy program in terms of how do you become the CFO's best friend and all those kind of things. I think to talk conversantly around finances is important to be a credible marketer in the boardroom. I actually think being HR's best friend is probably the next frontier, and to work with the people side of the business to ensure that the makeup of the marketing team is the people that can take your product and your market and your message to market in a way that kind of works for the customer is probably I think the biggest change that we're going to see moving forward. Yes, there's the access to technology is ever evolving, but I feel like we still hire the same people to do what will become fundamentally different jobs.
I think that's great advice. You know, I fundamentally agree. I think that, you know, any team is a composition of its skill sets and the tapestry of skill sets you've got there. So I think that that's great wisdom. Where do you think we're getting it wrong at the moment?
I think we can be pretty lazy when it comes to recruitment. I think we're almost the risk is that you play in the middle, and actually I think in a world of you know, machine learning and generative AI and those kind of things, I actually think there's a opportunity to actually create quite polarized teams, which is you do need a generation of professionals who can harness that technology to make sure that you go to market in the most effective way. But the other end of the spectrum, you still need ideas people. And I think where we're getting it wrong is we're trying to create a population of generalists who are expected to have that purely human light bulb moment, and then do all of the performance marketing or SEO, all this, you know, become a data scientist as well as
a strat consultant, the CTO.
The scope creep within marketing is real, and I live it. I personally live it every day in terms of the hats that I'm expected to wear, and I'm just at the pointy end of the business. But that is flowing down, and I do worry, and I'm probably guilty of this. Is that you write a job spec and you kind of you go. You know, you write it with so much hope and optimism that you're going to find this unicorn that is a data scientist and an art director. And actually no, build specialist teams. Going back to the military analogy kind of thing. You need trench diggers and paratroopers, and they're fundamentally different things. And therefore, I think technology is creating opportunities for that. But as humans, we are wired in certain ways, and therefore I think we need to play on people's strengths rather than this notion of kind of a messy middle where you've got a bunch of generalists who are operating at 60%.
Yeah. So there's two areas I'd like to poke at, if I may. The first, I think, and you mentioned this, and you're not the first person, even on this show, that's mentioned this around the scope creep amongst senior marketers.
Right.
How do you insulate yourself against that? What's your, you know, what's the strategy to prevent, you know, the stretch where you're butter spread over too much bread?
I don't know.
Fair enough.
I
hire brilliant people
as much as you can, but make the business case that you might need to hire more brilliant people than is currently in the budget.
Yeah.
But demonstrate the business effect of doing that. Because if you don't, then if you've grown up like I have in your career as being patted on the head for being a good doer, that becomes learned behavior, and then you're always eager to please, and you know, and then you end up doing stuff yourself, and to get out of that it takes unbelievable discipline and bravery to kind of push back on ultimately usually your boss to go, I can't do that, and I singularly fail at that most of the time, and I'm the.
Can you give us a specific example of where you've maybe stepped off that path?
Yeah, I'm sure I can. I mean, taking this job, right, is probably a good example, whereby I was the chief marketing officer of one of the UK's biggest media businesses, global. And when me and my wife decided to move back to Sydney, she's Australian. I remember saying to myself, what I'm not going to be is a CMO of a radio company, because I've done that, and the risk is that it would feel a retrograde step going from a 70 million person market to a 26 million and all those kind of things, and therefore my kind of I absolutely achieved my objective of landing a role which was what is effectively a CMO and a CDO role kind of combined, and it's genuinely felt like growth, as the title would suggest, but personal growth in that I'm now running an engineering team, which is all new for me. I'm running distinct businesses in terms of our podcast business and our streaming business and all those kind of things. So it's great, but the problem is that you kind of what you sell to the business is I can do all of those things at 100% capacity, and we still only have the same 24 hours in the day. So I think some of it is self-determined, and it's only when you're doing it that when you see it on a job description, you kind of go, that looks cool. It's only when you're doing it you can then go, actually that bit I can lead that, but I can't do that, and B, I probably shouldn't do that either. So that's where I've had a certain degree of success in the business around campaigning for, and normally it's happened through natural churn. When somebody leaves, and I'm talking about my direct report line, so I've got five direct reports who run individual functions within the growth team. When someone leaves, I have the opportunity to go, that person was in the business for 10 years. And you get, in radio in particular, you get a lot of lifers, because it's just a great, fun industry to work in, and people like to hang around, and Nova in particular has got a fantastic culture. Taking the kind of the business case to my boss and saying, now's an opportunity to get somebody from out of our industry who is going to genuinely drag up the competence of that team, and they're going to free up 15% of my time. And that 15% of my time means that the thing that I can have more impact, or the projects I can take on with that time are going to be additive to the business. So you kind of have to wait for your moment to do it.
And change breeds opportunity always.
Exactly
you need
that.
A bit of velocity.
And when you go into a leadership role, I think that the statistic is that within the first 12 months, 40% of your leadership team will leave, and that's quite kind of helpful, because you kind of don't blame when you know that's just a thing. Then you have to take those churn opportunities to go, was the remit of that person right, and was the skill set for that remit right, and which bits do I need to change? And if that means I have to go back to whether it's the CEO or the CFO and say, the market rate for that role is now gone from here to here, but with that price point, I can now get somebody who's going to be transformative to that function. I've had more success in that than failures, because you're hired as a person, and particularly at a senior level, you become the price point is more impactful to the P&L. Their job is to make sure that they're getting the best out of you, and if you can prove that by surrounding yourself with a great senior leadership team can free you up to do more, it becomes you're kind of knocking on an open door at that point.
Adam, I think that is great counsel. I think it's really good advice for those that are navigating that same dynamic of stretching too thin and putting all of those monkeys on their back. In the absence of that velocity, I presume that there is a fairly significant level of investment that you're putting into sharpening your own axe, right? Ongoing learning as you step into these roles, and you feel those growing pains, as we all do. I'd love to get some insight into how you've navigated that, right? So where you don't have the opportunity to outsource or delegate down to your leaders, one of the fallacies I often hear is that once you get to the top, you stop learning, or you stop having to refine your craft. But in fact, I find that it's the opposite. The further up, it's lonelier, and you've got a groundswell of information that you need to get your head around. What's been your philosophy and your approach there?
In terms of like self-development? Yeah. I think there's two sides to that coin. One is having the self-awareness to acknowledge when you are learning, because actually the flip side of having an incredibly broad role like I do is that actually you're in front of people, or you're in meetings, or you're working on projects that are probably not necessarily in your direct comfort zone, and the first thing is actually, and this is kind of almost like the kind of whether people do it through those kind of those gratitude moments or journaling or whatever, is actually having the presence of mind to go, wow, this is all new for me, and I'm sitting here when the CFO is going through the discounted cash flow of this potential acquisition, and you're like, I'm learning something new, and this is a really good thing, It's on the job in inverted commas, but it's really easy to kind of not acknowledge the fact that you're in a really luxurious position of being thrown into situations where
it's still filling your cup. Yeah,
totally. Because the negative side is that you sit there going, I don't know what the hell they're on about. Why am I here? I'm just the marketing guy, kind of thing. So I always try to have that, and I think as humans, it's always good to have cues for that. And I always find if I'm writing something down, because I'm a terrible note taker, if I'm writing something down, it means it's really important.
It's
and
big,
somewhere my brain has gone, you're going to need that at some point. So that's my kind of moment to go. You're now in a learning mode. And one of the things you do learn by being a marketing academy scholar is that even if you never ever read it again, the fact that you wrote it down makes you, and I'm going to insert a made-up stat here, but makes you 6 times more likely to remember it.
Yeah.
Just because you wrote it down. And
Yeah.
I think acknowledging the learning that we're all doing by, like I say, the flip side of having this massive scope creep is that you're just doing more stuff, and that inevitably is learning. So that's probably the, like I say,
The part A.
The part A. The part B is how you actively then go and outside of your day-to-day go and kind of learn stuff. And there's, I think for me, that is building a roster, for a better word, of mentors, of people around you who have the generosity of time and wisdom to help coach you through this tricky stage in life and careers. And my personal challenge has been that I left a lot when I moved at the end of 2021 from London back to Sydney, kind of, whilst I've maintained as many of those as I can remotely, the ability to go to somebody, can I buy you a coffee or a beer? That limits that when you're on the other side of the world. So I'm rebuilding that as we go. And I've probably got 3 or 4 people that I can call on at any time who've either done a job like mine or are working in broader business that can empathize, but most importantly, aren't working in media, that can therefore look at things quite
from the outside in
objectively, is just such a luxury. But it takes investment. Like it takes, you have to invest the time to maintain those relationships, and then once a quarter or whatever it is, leave work at 4 o'clock so you can then go and travel across town to go and have that drink with that person. And I always find, as being somebody, for a select group of people in this country that hopefully look at me as somebody they can call on to do that, being a, whether this is a male thing or not, I don't know, but being a fixer, it's like, give me a problem that I can fix. I get much more fulfillment out of somebody saying, I've got this thing, can I talk to you about
Here's
it?
a Rubik's Cube. Show me how it's solved.
Exactly, rather than, can we just have a chat?
Yeah.
And if it's just a chat, then I guess the subset to that might be that maybe it's something which is more personal or emotional rather than a problem that needs to be fixed. And maybe and this is something that I have to continue to learn, and this is more about my marriage more than anything. It's like you just can't. Sometimes you just got to listen. Sometimes
I know that rub very well.
And I think it has been thrown back at me a number of times. It's like, I'm not asking you to fix it. I'm just asking you to listen.
Yeah.
And that can play out in professional relationships as well. But equally, I think where I probably have more value in terms of mentorship is, I've got this gnarly thing, can you help me pick a path through it? And I mentor a couple of people within Nova, and giving context to that mentorship is, I think, is the most powerful thing. And I had that when I was one of the marketing scholarship when I was in the UK. I was head of marketing at Nokia for West Europe. And my boss, the CMO, had gone into a global role. So literally, I think on week 6 of a 1-year program, suddenly when your boss leaves, you kind of go, oh, I'd quite like that job. And all of the mentors that I had during my time on the Marketing Academy, and having a business coach for the whole year, which is the biggest luxury you could ever have. I wish I could afford to have a coach, on call at any given time. The project was become the CMO of Nokia.
Yeah. And so as soon as you get that context, all of a sudden these relationships get a new gravitas.
They just have meaning.
Yeah.
Like so suddenly the conversation with my coach wasn't how are you feeling or what's your purpose. Is let's look at your stakeholder map. Who's going to make the decision on who is the next? I think it was actually as marketing director rather than CMO. Who is the next marketing director of this business in this market, and what is brand Adam Johnson to them, and how do you need to move it from A to B? So giving those mentoring relationships context and meaning, and going back to the whole 10% market share, a goal is a fantastic thing to have.
But also real structure. I mean, what I'm certainly hearing is the level of investment, that it takes to farm the orchard, so to speak.
Yeah.
Is not insignificant. It's not just, hey, I'm going to call Adam up once a quarter and go, do you want to go for lunch? There's a real impetus to put structure and rigor around that relationship.
Yeah, and also what I find is the minute you finish up, say, can we diarise the next one?
Good shout.
And it will move, or it might get cancelled. But to know there's something on the horizon that within the next X number of weeks, I know I've got time with that person. It's kind of a bit of a comfort blanket. And I always try and do that, which is let's just agree on when we're going to meet next, knowing that life gets in the way, but knowing that it's there to maintain momentum. Because if you don't, the risk is that it just fizzles out. Because we're all busy.
I'd like to shift gear just a little bit because I'm fascinated. I think that what you've just spoken through, I think really resonates certainly with me, and what you've got to do once you start to get towards senior leadership. It becomes a business of relationships. I'd like to focus inward a little bit in terms of your team and the teams that you lead. Particularly, you mentioned something earlier around, I guess, a stretching of the skill sets that sit within your team, particularly as you get into broader senior level roles. What are the building blocks, or I like to think through a Lego block model. What are the foundational stones of the cultures and the team that you try to foster within your group, and what's your principles for leadership there?
I think the first thing is, and most people will, unless you're literally building a startup, you're probably inheriting a team. And during the course of your tenure, you'll get a chance to reimagine and reinvent it. But ultimately, it starts with a respect of why that person is doing that job in the first place. And the likelihood is because they've spent, and if you're talking about director level, which is kind of the level that reports to me, they've probably been doing it for 20 years of their life, and they're probably pretty good at it. So having the respect of functional expertise and deference to that is really important for me. And even in when I look at my direct reports, my head of marketing is the stream that I've come up with. So he's the one.
He bears the brunt of your detailed knowledge,
right?
Yeah,
he's the one which is I've done your job. And for my other direct reports are they're a head of publicity, so I've never been a PR person. I have a head of podcasts, who is Rachel Corbett, who is just who is brilliant, but I've never done her job. I have a head of digital experience and data, and my career's been a million miles away from that. And the other one is a head of audience engagement, which is, I guess, is kind of the promotions team within the radio business. So there's only one of my kind of direct reports who I can hand on heart say I've lived your lived experience every day. And even with him, I desperately try and not be the guy that did your job. And you have to really kind of keep yourself in check on that side of things. The other four is ultimately is almost positioning yourself as an enabler. My only job is to make sure that your expertise is deployed in a way that benefits the business. And a lot of that time, it's the boring stuff like budgets and people.
Or removing an impediment, right? If there's an impediment, come and see me. And
exactly that. Or it's air cover. Sometimes people just want permission, and they want someone to say to them, if it all goes tits up,
I got your back.
I've got your back. Yeah. And the value of that is incredible, because not only is that enablement for them to get on and do their job and do the thing that they love doing, you would hope, it also builds a foster of trust within you, which is that if this turns out to not to be the right thing, then I'm not carrying that weight myself. And if it does end up like that, and this is in the minority of cases, I would say to my boss, I greenlit that.
Yeah. It's on me.
For all of these reasons, and I made that decision based on these reasons, and there is the psychological safety in our business where my bet would be he would say fair enough, and what have you learned from it? Yeah. I think my job is ultimately to respect why these people are in senior positions themselves, and then enable them to as hackneyed as it is. To do the best work of their careers.
Yeah, build their Eden.
That's all my job is. And even if you leave, I want you to look back and go, the time that I was working in Adam's team at Nova, I did the best work of my career. And my job is only to create that environment for them to do that.
I'll tell you what, we should all be so lucky to work for such a team. Honestly, I think that, credit to you and the guys that you lead. Last one from me. If someone's watching or listening in, and what you're saying is really resonating with them as it is with me, right? And I think that, we should all aspire to be the type of leader that you've articulated today. If you could go back to Adam 20 years ago, knowing what you know now, and give yourself 3 pieces of advice that are going to set you up for the success that you've earned along the way, what would that be?
Oh, don't sweat the small stuff. Is something that the amount of times that I've had, sleepless nights about things because of something, something that I said, or something that didn't go to plan, or a tricky conversation with when you're quite junior and you have a challenging meeting with a very senior person, and I try and now being closer to that stage of life, I try not to be the scary senior person in the room. It is, and with hindsight, realizing how inconsequential that is, and particularly for CEOs and board members and those kind of things, recognizing now what I didn't recognize then, which is that they've forgotten that the minute they walked out of the room. They've forgotten that. Yeah. They've got so much other stuff on that they're not holding on to that thing that you are. So try to learn from it, write down what happened, and let it go. I still don't think I do that all the time.
You're only human, mate.
Yeah, exactly. And the more senior you get, the more impacts the interfaces that you have with business leaders, business owners, etc. have. But it's so I guess when I say don't sweat the small stuff, the small stuff gets bigger, but it's all in
relative.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, don't sweat the small stuff.
Don't do people a favour by promoting them before their time.
Oh, I like this. Okay. Can you give me an example of when you've got that wrong?
Yeah, I can. So it was in a previous role, and I won't name the. It was when I was at Global, and you desperately want the best thing for good people, and not once, maybe 2 or 3 times in my career, you give somebody an opportunity to step up into a space because they work really hard and people really like them and they have great impact. And then you do it and then you go, oh no, I got it wrong. And the biggest victim of that is them. It's not you. It's them, because they lose confidence. They lose profile in the business, and I think that there is a real risk when you champion people, that when an opportunity arises, you want to put them into it as soon as you possibly can. And I remember missing out on a role. No, it wasn't a role. It was having done so I did the marketing fellowship, which is kind of for CMOs who ultimately want to be business leaders. And I applied in 2018. And let's see if Sherilyn listens to this, and didn't get on it. I was gutted. I was really gutted about that. I got it on it the next year, and I look back and I go, thank God I didn't do it in 2018. And Sherilyn is exceptional at this in terms of picking the right person at the right time for that opportunity. And And I think if I did it in 2018, I wouldn't have got the most out of it, and B, it might have broken me in that we ended up having our second child at the end of 2017, and we're renovating a house, and doing what is quite an intense year-long course might have been the straw that broke the camel's back. So I think having the presence of mind to let people develop at their own time, push them, accelerate it, but I think when you put somebody into a position where they're more, going back to my previous point about creating an environment for success, I have created an environment for failure, and my cross to bear is that whilst it looks bad on you, it actually feels really bad for the individual. So yeah, that's probably the second one. Third one is probably something that's come to mind probably in the last six to 12 months, and Nova has helped me get to this. And it also maybe in a helpful way to kind of stitch things back up to one of your first questions about the scope creep of senior marketers. I've been guilty in the past of trying to be the non-marketer. As in now I'm a marketing director, I'm going to talk about finance and sales and revenue and EBITDA and those kind of things, because that's what's expected of me now that I'm on the exec team or I'm on the board or those kind of things. Because it just gets drilled into you that if you're just the guy that's making the ads or the girl that's making the ads, then you're only ever going to be a marketing person, and therefore you need to be able to have a grown-up conversation with the head of sales about market penetration or about yield and those kind of things. And kind of what I've come to realize is you kind of do, but also you kind of don't, because that's not what you pay. The commercial leader is paid to be the commercial leader, and the CFO is paid to be the financial expert, and the COO is paid to be the operationals. You need to kind of understand that if you have ambitions to lead a business. But if you stop being the fire starter, if you stop being the person who can be relied on to bring something genuinely new into the business, in terms of that might be an idea, or it could be a product, or it could be in our world, it could be a different approach to how we find new radio talent, for example. Then you stop becoming valuable, and actually being a proud marketer in its broadest sense, as in being the person that brings a wrapper of creativity, and also just a bit of fun.
Yeah.
Right. The personality profile of a board becomes quite sales and finance driven. It is the reality, and it tends to be the kind of the person running people and the person running marketing as bringing, from a cultural point of view, bringing a bit of fun to the business, because and walking that fine line between being the colouring in department and then going so native that all you talk about is revenue and profit is a tricky balancing act. So I think, how do I summarize that third one? Just I guess kind of remember your roots
and celebrate the role you play.
Exactly that. Yeah, maybe that's a better
wow,
summary of
that is some exceptional advice, and thank you for your generosity of insight there. Adam, it has been an absolute pleasure chatting to you today.
Likewise, thank you.
I cannot wait to ask you a bunch more questions after this. But thank you for joining us on the show, mate. I really do appreciate it.